I don't date her kind, the Mafia boss said. Then he became obsessed with the girl in red. The air inside the VIP lounge above the underground casino was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of power. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over men in tailored black suits who spoke in hushed Korean and English, their laughter low and controlled. This was not a place for ordinary people. This was Taehoon's kingdom. Taehoon sat at the center table, fingers adorned with silver rings that caught the light with every movement. The dragon tattooed across his neck and shoulder seemed to breathe as he turned his head, its scales disappearing beneath the collar of his charcoal suit. His eyes, dark and calculating, swept the room with the confidence of a man who had never been told no and survived. Hyung Nim, one of his associates said, leaning closer, keeping his voice respectful. The lawyer representing Kwame Mensah is here tonight, the one handling the shipping container case. Taehoon didn't look up from his whiskey. The one who thinks she can intimidate me with international trade law? Yes, they say she's unbeatable in court. Hasn't lost a case in 3 years. Everyone has a price, Taehoon replied, his voice smooth as silk over steel, his Korean accent making each English word sound like a threat wrapped in velvet. Another man at the table shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the entrance. Good luck with that, boss. I heard she doesn't even acknowledge men like us. And well, she's not exactly your type. Taehoon finally raised his eyes. The dragon on his neck seemed to pulse. Type. The man swallowed. You know, you've always said. I know what I said. The words came out quiet, deadly. I don't date her kind. I never saw the need. Some lines you don't cross. The table fell silent. No one dared speak when Taehoon used that tone. What Taehoon didn't realize in that moment of casual cruelty was that his father's voice still lived in his throat. Every word of discrimination he had ever spoken was not his own. It was an inheritance passed down like the silver rings on his fingers, like the dragon carved into his skin. His father had taught him that power came from purity, that some people were born to command and others to follow. And Taehoon had believed it for 36 years. He had believed it. Then the doors opened. Time didn't stop. Time shattered. Amina Okafor entered wearing a red silk dress that looked like it had been stitched from fire and justice itself. The fabric moved with her body, not provocatively, but powerfully, like armor made of flame. Her skin, deep brown and radiant, seemed to glow under the chandelier light, as if she carried her own warmth beneath her flesh. Her natural hair framed her face in soft, confident curls that added to her already commanding presence. She didn't walk. She claimed space with every step. Her eyes swept across the room like a queen inspecting a court unworthy of her time. And she did not look at Taehoon. She did not need to. What no one at that table understood was that Amina Okafor had spent her entire life being underestimated. She had been brilliant since childhood, but that brilliance had always come with qualifications, with men telling her she was impressive for someone like you, as if her excellence was an exception rather than the rule. She had learned to turn dismissal into fuel, to let other people's low expectations sharpen her into something they could never ignore. She had not come here to be seen by Taehoon. She had come to make him pay. Taehoon couldn't sleep. For a man who had built an empire on control, the sensation was intolerable. He lay in his penthouse overlooking the glittering Seoul skyline, replaying the moment Amina Okafor had dismissed him with surgical precision. I don't beg men who confuse fear with authority. No one had ever spoken to him that way. Not politicians he'd bought. Not rivals he'd buried. Not the countless women who had learned that proximity to power was its own currency. By dawn, he'd made his decision. Find out everything, he told Minjun, his most trusted associate. Over encrypted voice call. I want her life mapped like a blueprint. Education. Cases. Finance. Weaknesses. Hyung Nim. She's just a lawyer representing. Did I ask for your analysis? Taehoon's voice was ice. Do what I pay you for. The line went silent. Then, yes, boss. 72 hours later, Minjun returned with a file thick enough to be a biography. Taehoon spread the documents across his desk like a general studying enemy terrain. Amina Okafor, age 28, born Lagos, Nigeria, raised between Accra and London. Education: Oxford University, first-class honors in law. Harvard Law School, graduated top 5%. Professional record: undefeated in international trade litigation for 3 consecutive years. Specializes in cross-border commercial disputes. Current client list reads like a Fortune 500 directory. Personal life: no romantic relationships on record. No scandals. No deaths. No evictions. No leverage points. Perfect. She was perfect. And that made her dangerous. What about the client? He asked. This Kwame Mensah? Minjun flipped to another section. Ghanaian shipping magnate. Legitimate businessman. Claims you illegally seized 4 of his containers at Busan port 3 months ago. Cargo value: $3 million USD. I remember. Taehoon leaned back. He was moving electronics through our territory without paying protection fees. That's not illegal seizure. That's business. Miss Okafor disagrees. She's filed papers with international arbitration. If she wins, she won't. But even as Taehoon said it, he wasn't thinking about shipping containers or arbitration panels. He was thinking about the way Amina's eyes had cut through him. The way she'd stood in his world and refused to be diminished by it. The coincidental encounters began on a Tuesday. Taehoon showed up at the Four Seasons Hotel where international legal conferences were held. Amina was there, presenting on sanctions compliance. He watched from the back of the room, anonymous in a tailored navy suit, as she commanded the stage with the same regal certainty she'd brought to his casino. When she finished, he approached with champagne and compliments. Impressive presentation, Miss Okafor. She looked at him the way one might acknowledge a stranger holding an elevator door. Polite, distant, forgettable. Thank you. Perhaps we could discuss the Mensah case over dinner? I believe there's room for. I don't negotiate outside official channels, Mr. Taehoon. If you'd like to settle, contact me through proper legal correspondence. She walked away before he could respond. He sent gifts next. A diamond bracelet from Cartier, returned unopened. First edition legal text she'd mentioned in an interview, returned with a note. I purchase my own books. An invitation to his private art gallery opening, where Korean politicians and CEOs mingled. She didn't respond at all. Taehoon found himself doing something he hadn't done in 20 years. Asking for advice. Women like her, his associate Jinwoo ventured carefully, they don't respond to displays of wealth. They've seen it all. They're immune. Then what do they respond to? Jinwoo hesitated. Respect? Equality? I don't know, Hyung Nim. Maybe she just doesn't like you. The truth of it stung worse than any insult. Taehoon began attending her cases, sitting in public gallery seats at arbitration hearings, watching her dismantle opposing counsel with the precision of a surgeon. She never acknowledged his presence, but he knew she noticed. Everyone noticed when Taehoon entered a room. After one particularly brutal cross-examination where she'd exposed falsified shipping manifests, he waited outside the courthouse. You're relentless, he said as she descended the marble steps. I'm thorough, she corrected, not breaking stride. There's a difference. I'd like to offer you a consultancy position. Name your price. She stopped, turned, and for the first time, looked directly at him with something other than professional detachment. Contempt. Let me be clear, Mr. Taehoon. I am not interested in your money, your power, or your sudden fascination with me. I represent people you've harmed. That makes us adversaries, not prospects for collaboration. I could make the Mensah case disappear. I don't need you to. Her voice was silk over steel. I'll win it myself. She was gone before he could respond, leaving him standing on the courthouse steps like a man who'd just been taught the meaning of humility. That night, Taehoon sat in his office, the Okafor file open before him. Something nagged at him, a familiarity he couldn't place. Okafor. He'd heard that name before. Not recently. Years ago. He pulled up his business archives, scrolling through rejected partnerships, declined contracts, ventures he deemed unworthy of his syndicate's protection. Then he found it. 2017. Sadiq Okafor, West African logistics firm. Proposal: safe passage rights for cocoa and electronics shipments through East Asian ports. Status: rejected, not our type. Taehoon's handwriting in the margin, casual and damning. I don't do business with men like you. His blood went cold. The file showed what happened next. Sadiq's ships hijacked within months. Insurance collapsed. Company bankrupted. And then, buried in the footnotes of a follow-up report he'd never read, Sadiq Okafor, deceased. Stress-induced stroke. Taehoon stared at Amina's photograph clipped to the current file. Father: Sadiq Okafor, deceased. The room tilted. The woman he'd been obsessing over, chasing, trying to possess. She was the daughter of a man he'd destroyed with a single sentence. And she had no idea he was the one who'd killed her father. 8 years earlier. Lagos, Nigeria. Sadiq Okafor believed in bridges. Not the concrete kind that connected land masses, but the invisible ones that connected continents, cultures, economies. He believed that cocoa from Ghana could reach kitchens in Tokyo. That electronics from Shenzhen could power homes in Accra. That trade, done right, could be the great equalizer. His logistics company was small 3 cargo ships, a warehouse in Lagos, and a dream larger than his modest capital could support. But Sadiq had something more valuable than money: vision and relentless optimism. Papa, why are you smiling? 20-year-old Amina asked one evening, finding him at the kitchen table surrounded by shipping manifests and route maps. Because, omo me, he said, using the Yoruba term of endearment. Next month we expand to East Asia. I've secured a meeting with the Korean syndicate that controls safe passage through their ports. Amina frowned. Syndicate? Papa, that sounds. Business is business, my daughter. Sometimes you negotiate with governments. Sometimes with those who hold real power. He squeezed her hand. Don't worry. I'm offering fair partnership. Protection fees, legitimate routes. Everyone benefits. She wanted to believe him. She always did. Seoul. Taehoon's office. 2017. Sadiq Okafor arrived 15 minutes early, wearing his best suit, charcoal gray, slightly worn at the cuffs but pressed to perfection. He carried a leather portfolio containing proposals, profit projections, routes that would benefit both parties. He waited in the reception area for 40 minutes before being summoned. Taehoon barely looked up when Sadiq entered. The Korean crime boss sat behind a desk of black marble and chrome, flanked by 2 silent enforcers. His eyes skimmed Sadiq's proposal for perhaps 30 seconds before he closed the folder. Mr. Okafor, Taehoon said, his accent making the name sound foreign, unwelcome. I appreciate you traveling here, but my organization operates on certain principles. I understand, Sadiq said eagerly, leaning forward. That's why I'm proposing a mutually beneficial. We work with established partners, people we trust, people from networks we understand. There was something in Taehoon's tone, something Sadiq had heard before in different rooms, different countries, wearing different faces but carrying the same message. I have references, Sadiq tried. My shipping record is clean. My rates are competitive. I don't do business with men like you. The words landed like stones. Sadiq's smile faltered. Men like, I'm not sure I understand. Taehoon's expression didn't change. Didn't need to. I think you do. My answer is no. My assistant will show you out. No explanation. No negotiation. Just a closed door. Sadiq sat in his hotel room that night, staring at the Seoul skyline, trying to convince himself it was just one rejection. One setback. He didn't know he'd just been marked. 2 months later, the first hijacking happened off the coast of Singapore. Sadiq's ship carrying 20 tons of cocoa, seized by pirates who knew exactly when and where to strike. It wasn't violence. He'd evolved past crude tactics. Just a phone call to immigration, a sudden irregularity with Mensa's visa extension, a polite detention that would last precisely long enough to miss the hearing. Legal, untraceable, Effective. Or so he thought. Amina walked into the arbitration chamber alone, wearing charcoal gray that made her look like a storm gathering strength. Miss Okafor, the arbitrator began, glancing at the empty chair beside her. Your client appears to be absent. Without his testimony, my client has been illegally detained by immigration authorities. Her voice cut clean. I have documentation proving his visa is valid through August. I'm filing an emergency motion for his immediate release and requesting a 48-hour continuance. She slid papers across the table with surgical precision. Taehoon, seated in the gallery with his legal team, felt something uncomfortably close to admiration. The arbitrator reviewed the documents, frowned. This is highly irregular. So is detaining a foreign national hours before he's scheduled to testify against a powerful defendant. Amina's eyes found Taehoon's across the room. But I'm sure it's just coincidence. The hearing adjourned. Kwame Mensah was released within 3 hours. Taehoon waited for her outside. That was impressive, he said as she descended the courthouse steps. That was justice, she replied without slowing. You can't prove I had anything to do with. I don't need to prove it. She stopped, turned. I just need to make it more expensive for you to cheat than to settle. And I will. They stood in the late afternoon sun, two forces that couldn't coexist in the same space without friction. Why do you hate me? Taehoon asked. The question surprised them both. Amina studied him, really looked at him for the first time beyond tactical assessment. She saw expensive tailoring that couldn't hide something hollow underneath. Power that hadn't bought peace. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I pity you. It would have hurt less if she'd slapped him. You pity me? You've built an empire. Yet you're terrified of a woman in a courtroom. You have wealth that could change lives, but you use it to hurt people who threaten your fragile sense of superiority. She tilted her head. Yes, I pity you. You don't know anything about me. I know you tried to sabotage my client because you can't win fairly. I know you send gifts to women who've rejected you because you think everything has a price. Her voice softened, became almost gentle. I know you've never had to question whether you deserve what you have. And that's the saddest thing of all. He showed up at her office 3 days later. Not with gifts or demands. Just standing in the reception area when she arrived at 7 a.m., 2 coffees in hand. I don't drink coffee with opposing counsel, she said. Then drink it as a human being accepting a gesture from another human being. Amina hesitated. Something in his posture was different, less armored. She took the cup. They sat in the building's courtyard. Morning sun filtering through glass, skyscrapers casting long shadows. You're not like the others, Taehoon said finally. What others? The people who want something from me. The ones who calculate what I'm worth before they calculate whether I'm worth knowing. Amina sipped her coffee. That's the problem. What is? You think being treated like a human being instead of an ATM makes me special. It doesn't. It makes everyone else you know opportunistic. She looked at him. Maybe the question isn't why I'm different. It's why you've surrounded yourself with people who aren't. The words landed in the space between them. My father taught me that power requires distance, Taehoon said quietly. That if people see you as equal, they'll try to tear you down. And you believed him? I'm starting to question what I believe. It was the most honest thing he'd said to her. Amina felt the conversation shift, from legal opponents to something more dangerous, more human. Questioning is a start, she said. But it's not redemption. You don't get credit for wondering if you've been cruel. You have to stop being cruel. How do I do that? By admitting the people you've dismissed, rejected, and harmed were just as deserving of dignity as you are. She stood, leaving her half-finished coffee. By recognizing that your kind and my kind are the same kind. Human. Taehoon sat alone after she left, her words echoing in the hollow space she'd exposed. For 36 years, he'd operated on inherited certainties. His father's voice in his head, telling him who to trust, who to use, who to discard. Lines drawn before he was old enough to question them. But Amina Okafor had walked across every line like they were invisible. And now the lines themselves were beginning to blur. He thought about Sadiq Okafor's proposal gathering dust in his archives. "I don't do business with men like you." Words he'd spoken without thinking, without caring. Had there been others? How many doors had he closed because someone didn't fit his inherited definition of worthy? Taehoon pulled out his phone, stared at Minjun's contact. He could crush Amina's career with 3 calls, destroy her reputation, make her disappear from his world entirely. Instead, he typed, "Drop the immigration complaint against Mensa. Let the case proceed fairly." He pressed send before he could reconsider. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close. But for the first time in his life, Taehoon was choosing to lose. And it felt strangely like freedom. The news broke on a Monday morning while Amina was reviewing discovery documents. Her phone erupted. Texts, calls, email alerts cascading like an avalanche. She opened the first link with steady hands that wouldn't stay steady for long. Prominent lawyer Amina Okafor under investigation for money laundering. The article was detailed, devastating. Documents allegedly showed her law firm had processed payments through shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Wire transfers totaling $4.7 million. Clients who didn't exist. Signatures that looked exactly like hers. Her coffee went cold as she scrolled through leaked bank statements, fabricated contracts, email chains she'd never written, but that perfectly mimicked her communication style. It was a masterpiece of destruction, professionally crafted, legally lethal, completely false. By noon, her accounts were frozen. The banking compliance department cited, "Suspicious activity pending investigation. Standard procedure. Career-ending timing." By 3 p.m., 3 clients had terminated their retainers. Their polite emails used words like optics and fiduciary responsibility. Translation, "We can't afford to be associated with scandal." By evening, her face was on financial news networks. Commentators who'd never met her discussed her pattern of deception and betrayal of client trust, with the confidence of people who confused speculation with fact. Amina sat in her apartment, modern, minimalist, every surface carefully curated to project competence, and watched her reputation disintegrate in real time. Her phone rang. Kwame Mensah. "Miss Okafor, I've been advised by my board to seek alternative counsel." She closed her eyes. "Mr. Mensah, these allegations are—" "I believe you," he said, and she heard genuine regret. "But my investors don't. And with the arbitration hearing next week, I cannot take the risk."
"I'm sorry."
The line went dead. It took Amina 48 hours to trace the attack to its source. Not Taehoon, she'd considered at first, but the strategy was wrong. Too elaborate, too specifically designed to destroy her legal standing rather than just hurt her. This was professional rivalry weaponized. She found the answer buried in client conflict records. Samuel Chun, shipping magnate, former client, the man she'd defeated in arbitration 6 months ago when representing one of his competitors. Chun had connections to Hong Kong triad networks, resources, grudges he nursed like investments. The leaked documents had originated from servers in Macau. The shell companies were registered to Chen's nephew. The fabricated emails routed through IP addresses traced back to his corporate offices. Amina had the proof. She also had frozen accounts, no clients, and a legal system that moved slower than reputation destruction. By the time she could clear her name through official channels, there'd be nothing left to clear it for. She showed up at Taehoon's headquarters at midnight. The building was dark except for the penthouse level. His office, always lit, always occupied. The guards recognized her from her previous visits, saw something broken in her posture, and called upstairs. Taehoon answered immediately. Let her up. When the elevator doors opened, he was standing alone. No associates. No bodyguards. Just him in shirt sleeves, looking at her like he'd been expecting this. Amina walked forward on legs that felt disconnected from her body. I know it wasn't you, she said, voice raw. Samuel Chun. Triad connections through Hong Kong. He fabricated everything. I know. Taehoon's voice was quiet. I received confirmation 3 hours ago. You knew. Something flickered. Anger, maybe, but she was too exhausted to sustain it. I have people monitoring threats against you. When the documents leaked, I investigated. He paused. I was going to contact you in the morning with the information. Why? Because you were right about everything you said. And because he stopped himself. Amina swayed slightly. When had she last eaten? Slept? Taehoon moved toward her. Careful. Like approaching something wild and wounded. I need help, she said. And the words cracked something inside her. The admission of weakness. The surrender of control. Everything she'd promised herself she'd never do again after burying her father. I don't trust you, she continued, tears finally breaking through. I don't even like you, but I have nowhere else to go. The legal system will take months. Chen's networks reach into law enforcement, banking regulators, media. By the time I prove my innocence officially, my career will be ash. She looked up at him. This man who represented everything she'd fought against, and hated how small her voice sounded. Can you help me? Taehoon had imagined Amina Okafor in many ways. Angry, victorious, passionate. Never this. Never broken. And it hurt worse than her contempt ever had. Yes, he said. But you're not going to like how. I don't care about ethics anymore. He learned how hers operated. The Byzantine regulations governing international finance, the precise language needed to dismantle accusations, the patience required to build airtight cases. They were terrifyingly effective together. The nights were different. Amina couldn't sleep, stress, strange bed. The weight of watching her life reassemble piece by fragile piece. She'd find herself in Taehoon's kitchen at 2 a.m., making tea she wouldn't drink. He always appeared eventually, like he'd been waiting. Can't sleep either? She asked the 5th night. I sleep 3 hours. Habit from when sleeping too long meant dying young. He poured himself whiskey. You want to talk about it? About being destroyed by a man I humiliated in court? Not particularly. About your father, then. Amina's hand stilled on her teacup. What about him? You mentioned he believed trade could connect continents. That's not a common philosophy for a logistics businessman. That's poetry. She smiled despite herself. He was poetic. Used to say every shipping container was a bridge between strangers who'd never meet, but whose lives touched through commerce. The smile faded. The world didn't appreciate poetry. It wanted pragmatism and power. What happened to him? He died thinking he'd failed. That he wasn't good enough. The words came easier in darkness. I watched it kill him slowly. The rejection, the financial collapse, the belief that he'd let our family down. Taehoon was quiet for a long moment. My father died violently. Rival syndicate, revenge killing. I was 16. Amina looked up. He spent his last years teaching me that strength meant never showing weakness. That certain people, certain types, would always try to drag you down to their level. His jaw tightened. I internalized every word. Built my empire on his foundation without questioning if the foundation was rotten. What changed? You did. On the 13th night, Amina asked the question that had been building since that first encounter. Why did you say it? That you don't date my kind. They were reviewing documents in his office, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa with evidence scattered between them. Taehoon's hand stilled on the paper he'd been reading. It's what I was taught, he said finally. My father, he believed in purity, that mixing outside certain lines diluted power, compromised legacy. He'd say, they will never understand our ways. They will always be other. And you never questioned it? No one in my world questioned it. Everyone agreed. It became truth through repetition. He looked at her. Until you walked into my casino and I couldn't look away. Suddenly everything I'd been taught felt like a cage I'd built around myself. Do you still believe it? I question everything when you look at me like that. The air between them shifted, charged. Amina found herself leaning closer without deciding to. Taehoon's hand moved to her face, stopping just before contact. asking permission with the hesitation. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "I know. We're still on opposite sides. I know." His thumb brushed her cheek. She closed her eyes. Then her phone buzzed. Both of them jerked back. Yuki's message. Got him. Chen's digital trail recovered. Fabrication proved. Sending to your banking regulator now. 72 hours later, the charges collapsed like a building with its foundation removed. Banking regulators issued public apologies. Media ran corrections. Clients called, apologetic and eager to return. Amina Okafor's name was cleared. She stood in Taehoon's office, watching news coverage of her exoneration, feeling relief that should have been triumph. "You did it," she said. "We did it." She turned to face him. 3 weeks of proximity, vulnerability, walls lowered in darkness. "I should go. Back to my life. My practice." "You should." Neither of them moved. "Thank you," Amina said, "for helping me when you had no reason to." "I had reasons." "Obsession isn't a reason. It's a compulsion." "Maybe it started as obsession," Taehoon said quietly. "But it became something else when I watched you refuse to break." Amina picked up her briefcase. 3 weeks of borrowed safety ending.
Hudbi, Taehoon.
She was halfway to the elevator when he spoke. "There's something you should know. About your father." She stopped, turned, and Taehoon realized he was about to destroy the fragile thing they built. But lies like debt always come due. "What about my father?" Amina's voice was steady, but Taehoon heard the undertow, the current of something dangerous just beneath the surface. He could lie, say it was nothing, let her leave with 3 weeks of almost tenderness still intact. Instead, he walked to his desk and pulled out a folder he'd been avoiding since the night he discovered it. "Before I show you this," he said, "you need to understand I didn't know. I didn't make the connection until." "Show me." Her tone left no room for preamble. Taehoon handed her the file. Amina opened it with the careful precision of someone defusing a bomb. Her eyes scanned the header. Sadiq Okafor, West African Logistics Firm, 2017. Her breathing stopped. Proposal. Safe passage rights for cocoa and electronics shipments. Partnership terms. Route projections. Her father's handwriting in the margins. Notes about fair trade. Dreams about connecting continents. And then, stamped in red across the top, rejected, not our type. Below it, in Taehoon's sharp script, "I don't do business with men like you." The folder slipped from her hands. Papers scattered across expensive carpet like evidence at a crime scene.
"No."
The word came out broken. "No, this isn't. Amina, don't." She stepped back as if his proximity could contaminate her. "Don't say my name. Don't you dare say my name." Her hands shook as she gathered the papers, reading each one with the desperate hope that she'd misunderstood. Misread. That this was another fabrication like Chen's documents. But these were real. Proposal submitted March 14, 2017. Rejection date March 15, 2017. 24 hours to destroy a man's dream. "You knew him," she whispered. "I met him once. He came to my office with a proposal. I barely looked at it before I—" Taehoon stopped, the truth too ugly to speak aloud. "Before you what?" Her voice was rising, control fracturing. "Before you decided he wasn't worth your time? Before you dismissed a good man's honest work because he didn't fit your inherited prejudices?" "Yes." The admission landed like a physical blow. Amina's laugh was jagged, broken glass in her throat. "Do you know what happened after you rejected him? Do you know what your casual cruelty cost? I know his ships were hijacked. His insurance collapsed. His insurance collapsed because you marked him." She was shouting now, 3 weeks of vulnerability turning to rage. "In this world, your world, when you reject someone, it's not just a closed door. There's a target on their back." Everyone knew. Everyone understood that Sadiq Okafor wasn't under your protection, which meant he was fair game. Taehoon's silence was confirmation. He lost everything in 6 months. His company, his savings, his reputation. Amina's voice dropped to something more dangerous than shouting. And then he lost his life. Stress-induced stroke. Alone in his office, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay, thinking he'd failed because he wasn't good enough. I didn't know. You didn't care. The words exploded out of her. You didn't care who he was, what he'd built, what dreams he carried. You looked at his skin and decided he was less than. Unworthy. Not your type. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice stayed steady. Prosecutor delivering a verdict. My father died thinking the world rejected him for being inadequate. But it was just you. One racist man with inherited power and a closed heart. You killed him without ever touching him. Amina, I can't undo.
No.
You can't. She wiped her face with shaking hands. You stood there 3 weeks ago and told me you were questioning your beliefs, that I made you see differently. What a beautiful redemption story. Her laugh was acid. Except you're not the protagonist seeking redemption. You're the villain who destroyed my family. And I've been sleeping under your roof, trusting you. Almost. She couldn't finish the sentence. The almost kiss hung between them like a ghost. I'm sorry, Taehoon said, and the words felt catastrophically insufficient.
Sorry.
Amina picked up her briefcase, movements mechanical. My father is dead. My childhood was defined by his absence. I built my entire life on the foundation of his failure. Worked myself to exhaustion trying to prove that our family wasn't less than, that we deserved respect. She walked to the elevator, pressed the button with controlled precision. And the man who caused all of it is sorry. The elevator dinged. Doors opened. Amina, please. She stepped inside, turned to face him one last time. You wanted to know why I pitied you? Her voice was hollow now, emptied of rage. Because you have everything and you are nothing. You have an empire built on your father's hate and you call it tradition. You have power and you wield it like a child with a weapon, destroying lives without even remembering their names. The elevator doors began to close. I will never forgive you. Taehoon stood alone in his office as dawn broke over Seoul. The city sprawled below, his territory, his kingdom, his empire built on inherited cruelty he'd never questioned. 3 weeks ago, these walls had felt like power. Now they felt like a tomb. He looked at the scattered papers on the floor. Sadiq Okafor's proposal. A good man's honest dream, dismissed in a single day because Taehoon had been taught that some people simply didn't matter. He'd spent 36 years believing that power meant never having to answer for his choices. Amina had just sent him the bill. And the cost was everything. 6 months later, Taehoon sat in his office surrounded by ghosts. Not the supernatural kind, the documented kind. Files spread across every surface. 23 years of business rejections. Proposals dismissed. Partnerships denied. Each stamped with variations of the same poison. Not our type. Doesn't fit our network. Cultural incompatibility. Euphemisms for prejudice. He'd spent 6 months excavating his own cruelty, and the archaeology was damning. 47 businesses rejected on grounds that had nothing to do with viability and everything to do with the color of the owner's skin, the accent in their voice, the foreignness of their names. Some had survived his rejection, rebuilt elsewhere, found other partners, persisted despite him. Others hadn't. Taehoon traced each trajectory with the thoroughness of a man trying to account for every drop of spilled blood. He hired investigators, not the kind who intimidated, but the kind who found people. Located the businesses that had survived. Identified the families of those that hadn't. And then he began writing checks. Hyung Nim, this is financial suicide. Min Jun protested, reviewing the ledger. You're paying restitution for deals that were legally rejected decades ago. No court would require this. I'm not doing it because a court requires it, Taehoon said. I'm doing it because it's owed. The first payment went to a Vietnamese restaurant owner. He'd refused protection in 2015. The woman had been forced to sell after repeated vandalism. Taehoon's check included the property value she'd lost, plus interest, plus enough to reopen if she chose. She accepted with trembling hands and eyes that held decades of accumulated wariness. Why now? she asked. Because someone taught me that power without accountability is just violence in expensive clothing. The second payment went to the family of a Nigerian tech entrepreneur whose startup funding had evaporated after Taehoon publicly declined to invest. The man had died of a heart attack 2 years later. His daughter was now 25, working 3 jobs to support her mother. Taehoon's check cleared her mother's medical debt and established a trust fund for her education. She called him crying. "You don't even know us." "I should have," he said. The ledger grew. 47 names became 47 acts of restitution. Some accepted immediately. Others rejected the money, their wounds too deep for checks to close. A few threatened legal action for what he'd done to their families. Taehoon accepted it all. He'd spent his life demanding respect through fear. Now he was learning that true accountability meant accepting consequences without defense. But one name remained at the top of his list, written in red ink. Sadiq Okafor, the Okafor Trade Scholarship Gala. Amina had founded it 4 months ago, a nonprofit helping young African entrepreneurs access global markets, mentorship programs, seed funding, legal support navigating international trade law. Everything her father had dreamed of providing but never got the chance. The gala was held at the Shilla Hotel, 300 guests an evening where, champagne flowing, silent auction tables displaying donated art and experiences. Amina wore emerald green silk and moved through the crowd like she'd been born for this, gracious, commanding, holy in her element. She was introducing a scholarship recipient when the murmur started. Heads turning, whispers cutting through conversation. Amina followed the crowd's gaze to the entrance. Taehoon stood alone. No bodyguards flanking him. No associates providing buffer. Just him in a simple black suit, carrying a leather portfolio, looking smaller somehow without his armor of enforcers. Their eyes met across the ballroom. Amina's hand tightened on her champagne glass. 6 months since she'd walked out of his office. 6 months of rebuilding her practice, her life, her sense of self separate from the man who'd destroyed her father. She'd trained herself not to think about him. The training failed spectacularly. Taehoon crossed the ballroom with measured steps. Guests parted instinctively, even without his usual intimidation. Some recognized him. Others simply sensed power and moved aside. He stopped 3 feet from Amina. "Miss Okafor," he said formally, "may I have a moment of your time?" Every eye in the ballroom watched them. Amina could refuse, publicly humiliate him, let security remove him. Instead, she said, "Follow me." They ended up in a private conference room off the main hall. Amina closed the door, crossed her arms. "You have 2 minutes. Taehoon opened the portfolio, removed a check and a leather-bound ledger. The check was made out to the Okafor Trade Scholarship Foundation. Amount: $1,500,000. Amina stared at it. Blood money doesn't. It's not blood money. It's restitution. He handed her the ledger. "This documents every business I rejected on discriminatory grounds over 23 years. 47 total. I've contacted each one. Offered compensation." She opened the ledger with suspicious hands. Page after page of names, dates, amounts paid, receipts, acceptance letters. A few rejection letters from people who'd told him to go to hell. And there, on the first page, Sadiq Okafor, West African Logistics, restitution, $1,500,000. Paid to Okafor Trade Scholarship Foundation. Date, today. Her throat closed. "I can't undo what I did," Taehoon said quietly. "I can't bring your father back or give you the childhood you deserved with him alive. But I refuse to keep being who I was." "This is just money," Amina whispered. "Money doesn't erase." "I know. That's why there's more." He pulled out another document. "I've restructured my business practices, hired a diversity consultant, implemented bias training across my organization, created a fund specifically for businesses owned by people I would have dismissed a year ago." He met her eyes. "You asked me if I still believe in types. I don't. I believe in the woman who wore red and taught me that my father's voice in my head was a prison I'd built myself. I believe I spent 36 years being cruel and calling it tradition. Why now? Her voice cracked. Why not when he was alive? Why not before you destroyed him? Because I didn't know better then. And now I do. He stepped back toward the door. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that your father's death changed something. That his dream, connecting continents, building bridges, it's alive in what you're doing. Taehoon opened the door. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure people like your father get the respect they deserved from people like me. He left before she could respond. Amina stood alone, holding a check worth more than her operating budget and a ledger documenting one man's attempt to account for his sins. And for the first time in 6 months, she didn't know what to feel. Amina found him in the hotel garden. Taehoon stood alone beneath cherry trees strung with lights, hands in his pockets, looking at the Seoul skyline like a man seeing his city for the first time, or maybe the last. Running away? She called. He turned, and something in his expression, unguarded, exhausted, real, made her chest tighten. Giving you space, he corrected. I don't want space. She walked closer, the ledger still clutched in her hands. I want answers. Ask. Amina took a breath. The question she'd been carrying for 6 months. Why should I believe this is real? That you've actually changed and this isn't just... She gestured at the portfolio, the check, the carefully documented restitution. Elaborate performance to ease your guilt. You shouldn't, Taehoon said simply. Belief requires proof over time. I'm only 6 months into what should be a lifetime of different choices. Then why come here tonight? Why not wait until you had years of evidence? Because your father deserved an apology 8 years ago. Waiting longer to give it wouldn't make it more sincere. It would just be more cowardice disguised as patience. The honesty landed between them like something fragile. Amina looked down at the ledger. 47 names. 47 families affected by one man's inherited prejudice. Some compensated. Some still wounded. All acknowledged. Do you know what the hardest part is? She asked quietly. Not the money or the apologies or even the restitution. It's that I want to believe you, and I hate myself for wanting it. Why? Because wanting to believe you feels like betraying my father. Like accepting that the man who killed him could somehow deserve a second chance. Her voice broke. How do I reconcile that? Taehoon stepped closer, careful, giving her space to retreat if needed. You don't, he said. You don't reconcile it because there is no reconciliation that doesn't dishonor what was lost. Your father is dead because of my cruelty. That truth doesn't soften with time or good deeds. It just is. Then what are you asking for? Nothing. The word was firm. I'm not asking for forgiveness or absolution or a chance to ease my conscience through your generosity. I'm showing you that I heard what you said. That I'm doing the work regardless of whether you ever acknowledge it. Amina studied him. This man who'd haunted her thoughts, ruined her father, saved her career, and broken her heart in the space of 9 months. Do you still believe in types? She asked. The question hung in the garden air. Taehoon met her gaze without flinching. I believe in the woman who wore red and taught me shame, he said. I believe that I wasted 36 years seeing people as categories instead of humans. I believe my father's voice controlled me long after he was dead. And I believe that real change isn't a destination. It's choosing different actions every single day until the old patterns starve from neglect. Silence settled between them, broken only by distant music from the gala. I'm not going to forgive you, Amina said finally. I know. Not today. Maybe not ever. I understand. But, she paused, choosing her words with the precision of a lawyer building a case. I won't stand in the way of you trying to be better. The scholarship will accept your donation. The businesses you've compensated deserved that justice regardless of my feelings.
Taehoon nodded slowly.
Amina took another breath. The next words were harder. And if you continue this work, real work, not performance, for years, not months, proving through action that you've actually changed. She looked directly at him. Then maybe, eventually, we can have a conversation about what forgiveness might look like. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, she corrected. It's about what I choose to believe is possible. That people can change. That cruelty isn't destiny. That my father's death can mean something beyond just pain. She held out her hand, formal, professional, the gesture of two people beginning from a place of honesty rather than romance. You will spend your life proving it, she said. Taehoon took her hand. Her grip was strong, certain. I know, he said, and I will. For a long moment, they stood there. Two people who destroyed and saved each other in equal measure, choosing something harder than love or hate. Accountability. Then Taehoon did something Amina had never seen him do. He bowed. Not the casual nod of social courtesy. A full, formal bow of deep respect. The kind given to elders, to teachers, to those who've earned honor through sacrifice. When he straightened, his eyes were bright. Thank you, he said, for not letting me hide from what I've done, for being the mirror I needed, even when the reflection was unbearable. Amina felt tears threatening but held them back. Don't thank me for holding you accountable. Thank yourself for finally listening. She turned back toward the gala, then paused.
Taehoon.
Yes. The work you're doing, the restitution, the structural changes, it matters. Not because it earns you redemption, but because it prevents future harm. Keep doing it. I will. And if in 5 years, you're still choosing accountability over comfort, still dismantling the systems your father built, she allowed the smallest hint of something that might, eventually, become hope. Find me. We'll talk. She walked away, leaving him in the garden with cherry blossoms falling like benediction. Redemption, like trade, must be earned through consistent action across time. Love without accountability is just desire wearing a disguise. And sometimes the most radical act is not forgiveness, but the choice to believe that people can grow beyond the cruelty they've inherited, one difficult decision at a time. Taehoon returned to Seoul alone that night, his empire still standing, but his understanding of power forever changed. Amina returned to her scholarship foundation, carrying a check that would fund 50 students and a conversation that had cracked something open in her chest. Neither knew what the future held, but both had chosen something harder than the stories usually allow. To honor the dead through building a better world for the living. To transform rage into structure. To admit that some wounds never fully heal, but that doesn't mean the work of healing isn't sacred. And to understand that the woman in red and the man who'd learned shame were writing a different kind of story. Not a fairy tale, a reckoning. If you enjoyed the story this far, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next chapter and enjoy more story from us. And if this story gave you chills, drop a like and share it with someone who loves powerful romance with a dangerous edge. Your support keeps these stories coming. Thank you.